Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Good Marketing with Stephanie. It's Tuesday, July 7th, and today my guests and I are going to break down the biggest event of the weekend. And no, not America 250, but something that generated probably a similar degree of attention. That's right, we're going to talk about Taylor Swift's wedding. Was it PR genius, a PR blunder, or somewhere in between? For this episode, I'm joined by a communications strategist with more than 20 years of experience helping big names navigate high-profile moments. My guest is a communications pro who really can do it all. He's taught Melissa McCarthy how to go live on Facebook from her personal phone, a very important skill, launched campaigns with Disney and Nicki Minaj, counseled the Lowe's racing team during the Jimmy Johnson years, built full stack marketing programs, and spent the last decade advising Fortune 20 execs through high stakes communications. All of these experiences have given my guests a front row seat to how communications really works, whether the spotlight's on a celebrity, on an athlete, or on a CEO. So he's agreed to join me today to tackle Taylor's reputation, pardon the pun, and attempt to answer one key question. Was this actually good or bad PR, or are we confusing online chatter with real-world impact? Welcome to the show, Matt C.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's great to be here. As a dad that lives in a house full of Swifties, I'm excited to talk all things Taylor. Funny enough, early in my career, about 10 years ago, I actually was working at the Home Shopping Network, and we did a concert with Big Machine. So this was around 2016 with Scott Borchetta, and Taylor was still very much alive and well in the Big Machine world at that time before the big split. So, I got a firsthand look at how that operation through about artists as brands and all of that really took place, especially from listening to Scott talk about it. These days, as you mentioned, I work in healthcare. It sounds like a completely different world. It isn't. High stakes, huge audiences. One bad week can really undo 10 good years of work. So the fundamentals really travel. So if somebody looks into my background, like, this dude's in healthcare. Well, there's a lot of similarities there. And as we talk today, we're going to talk a lot about, the similarities between somebody like Taylor and a massive CEO for a Fortune 20 that might be at a healthcare insurer or something like that, and how those, continue to kind of be the same. So what's interesting about this wedding has nothing to do with celebrity gossip. I know we want to talk about it. I absolutely want to talk about it. Two people managed one of the most visible reputations on earth in real time on a holiday freaking weekend, 250th, the sesquicentennial, or however you say it, right? In the middle of Manhattan. That's an absolute case study, and I'm excited to break into it with you today.
Yeah, same. And I'm glad that you point out, it's not just celebrity gossip, right? Like we talked about, you have a household full of Swifties. I am not a Swiftie, right? Like we're here to talk about PR, but it is fun to get an opportunity to talk about something as high visibility as this and be able to connect it to those things that most of us do in our day-to-day work, right? Like you in healthcare, me and my agency with the clients I work with, and any of our listeners, right, who work for a company or a brand and are like, okay, but what does this have to do with me? There definitely are learnings there. So, to that end, Matt, I would love to learn a little bit more about your career origin story, right? You've been working with major brands and public figures for more than 2 decades. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this world and what you're doing now in the healthcare space, and maybe a little bit of that working with public figures, what that has taught you going into the healthcare space?
Yeah, absolutely. I really kind of took off, after doing work in the online education space and social media and all of that, around building engagement programs and bringing people together. And that really kind of cultivated around the work I did at the Home Shopping Network. I led social media for the brand. This was the time when Mindy Grossman was there, who got her, really cut her teeth at Nike and bringing a lot of celebrities in to Nike. As we've seen, that's the brand we know today, right? As Nike is associated with all these athletes. Mindy really started that, and she brought that to HSN when she came to HSN. And that was really about, you might think of HSN as old ladies in cat sweaters and things like that. Our grandparents, ordering stuff online or through, pick up the phone and dialing. That was really changed when Mindy got there, as we started to bring on folks like Keith Urban, Nicki Minaj, Michael Bublé and others, Melissa McCarthy, and all of that. So, I had a firsthand kind of view of this when those brands would come and launch products at HSN. I was there when Serena Williams and Drake were dating, or there all the talk about, hey, they might be dating, they're together. And we launched her fashion show and did that on HSN, on hsn.com, streamed it on social media. And there is still a picture of me today that I teach at West Virginia University, and I talk about advertising and impacts it has on society. And I pull this picture up of me in the background as Serena and Drake do their first kind of public PDA. And there I am in the background in a plaid suit coat, and I say, look, I've seen it from the background. So, getting those kind of firsthand moments of seeing how things move in real time really allow me to kind of, anticipate what might happen next, and how to really ensure that we're carrying the narrative from the very beginning all the way through to the end. That really kind of came full circle when I went to Fleischman Hillard to lead an office in Charlotte, and counseled Gatorade, counseled Lowe's Motor Racing and Jimmy Johnson and team during the Colin Kaepernick era of kneeling, right? So kneeling for the national anthem, working hand in hand with those teams to say, what does the social conversation look like? And what should Jimmy do if other racers kneel before the national anthem? What should he say if he's questioned about it? We know what his personal belief is, but how does he look at, and we're going to talk a lot about this with Taylor, how does he make sure that he stands up and does what he believes in, but also really kind of ensures that what he's doing with his fan base, he's not alienating them and things like that. Worked with Academy Sports and Outdoors when someone unfortunately had purchased a weapon from one of their stores in Texas and committed a mass shooting. So working with them to help repair their brand after that as well. So I've really kind of done a lot from there. Decided to get out of social media after doing it for quite some time and getting to something that I really believe in, which is healthcare, and find that, even though it's, I kind of tell people that it's like making donuts, but now I'm using different ingredients, right? A lot of the things are exactly the same, but I might be sprinkling this one with rainbow sprinkles versus chocolate sprinkles that I was using with other brands. So, after doing that for 10 years, I've been doing my own consultancy now and working closely with large Fortune 20 companies and others to really help ensure that, they're getting the messages out there that they need. And if they need help in a pinch, that I can step in and really help them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, your experience across all these different situations, both, crises, obviously, and then just thinking about like that, keeping that narrative sort of under control right from start to finish, I think really underscores the conversation that we're having here, which is how much thought and attention and detail goes into doing publicity, doing PR for a celebrity, right? And I think that's where I would like to get into this conversation about Taylor Swift. And first, to kind of tee up the convo here, I have a crazy statistic to share just to emphasize how big this wedding actually was in terms of attention, right? So on Friday, July 3rd, the day that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce got married, but also the day before the 250th birthday of our entire nation, mentions of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce actually exceeded mentions of America and 250, which is super interesting. And what's even more astounding is that, and this is all, data from Muckrack, what's even more astounding is that if we look at the total mentions of these terms between July 2nd and July 6th, there were only about 15% more articles published about America 250 than about Taylor Swift's wedding. So let that sink in, right? So 96,000.
This is our royal wedding, Stephanie.
Yeah.
If you can think back to, that when William and Kate got married,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're old enough to remember Princess Di and now King Charles, there's now the PR behind both of those is so different, because of the crown and our royalty from American standpoint is way different. But this is our royal wedding. These are two of the biggest stars, of the last, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years joining together from a marriage standpoint. Plus, you've got two completely different backgrounds from a fan standpoint. You've got football fans, and then you've got, Taylor Swift pop music fans, which are really different, but coming together as well. So it was definitely like a moment that was there that you could absolutely know that, any mention number you told me, I knew it was going to be like through the roof. Now, I did see someone online say, hey, they got married on July 3rd because if they ever get divorced, she can release an album on July 4th and call it Independence Day, which does fit with what we've seen Taylor do in the past. But yeah, you're right. Like this is one of the biggest moments from a pop culture standpoint we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, it's a huge cultural moment. And, again, just to show or emphasize the scale of this, right? Like the 250th birthday of the entire country, right? That we live in, that's been around for, 300 years, right? Almost 300 years. I know it's 250 years since the Declaration of Independence was signed, but,
yeah,
America has been a thing for longer than that. But 96,000 articles and change approximately, right? Published about America 250 compared to 82,000 articles mentioning Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's wedding. So that is the scale we're talking about here. Listen, I got married earlier this year. There were no news articles about my wedding, right? I can't imagine having 82,000 news articles over the period of like 4 days published about my wedding. So
you didn't have a wedding blog, is what you're telling me, with plenty of articles.
Yeah, this is a huge moment, to your
It's
point.
massive. And one other thing, just to put this in perspective as well, is we've been talking about America 250 for quite some time. Like, this is not something that just happened. Obviously, Taylor and Travis have been engaged for a while. People have been speculating that they were going to get married for quite some time. But we've known that 250 has been coming up for quite some time, and Congress had prepared things as well. So, some of those articles, were kind of in the can and ready, where you can see the spike for Taylor and Travis was much larger.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? That actually is a great lead in to, my first big question for you about all this Taylor Swift wedding stuff, which is that details on the wedding had been leaking for a while, right? And nobody was 100% sure, like, what was true, what wasn't. And a lot of people, myself included, were surprised when it turned out to be true that they were getting married at Madison Square Garden on a holiday, the biggest holiday weekend of the year. Some were so high visibility, some were so public. Then you had the little sign that popped up after they did their vows that, said they're married. And then you had the Empire State Building doing the something blue. So, just observing all of that, it seems here like the intention may have been to generate a lot of buzz, speculation, conversation. So, Matt, I want your high level take. If you look at all of these things together, was this good PR? Was this bad PR? Or are we confusing online chatter with real world impact?
Yeah. So before I get started, I just want to mention that, great PR isn't about getting attention. It's about earning trust while managing attention, right? So most people graded this wedding on volume, which we were just talking about it. Pros, PR pros, like you and I and others, we graded on trust. So when I look at this, I truly see it as good PR, full stop, flat out. Because most people are really grading this wrong. They're looking at social conversation. They're grading it on volume. How loud was the criticism? How many angry posts? How many columnists called it tacky and things like that? That's really grading attention versus looking at the trust that I talked about, and specifically trust with the audience you actually need. So, it's looking at, all right, surround sound, people that may be judging this that just heard about it. Like, I can call my mom, who cares less about Taylor Swift than anybody, and she's going to have an opinion on it. But does it really matter to Travis and Taylor's brands if my mom cares about it? No, probably not, right? So let's look at the execution. You had 1,000 guests at the most famous arena in the world, Madison Square Garden, right? And nothing major leaked. Other than we like started to hear that it was going to happen there, right? Phones that were banned inside. My wife, the only thing she cared about was like, I want to see all the outfits. Show me the outfits of the people that went. What's Trick Taylor's dress look like and things like that. We didn't see a lot of that, right? An ironclad NDA that people had. And people were like, wow, that's weird. NDAs for a wedding. But when you think about these two folks that have been public with their appearances on New Heights and some of that kind of stuff, but are very private people, the NDAs like make total sense. The story got told on their terms, which is massive from a PR standpoint. It was in their sequence. They are framing like everything. If you say, hey, how do I make this as a perfect PR story? Like that is it, right? Hey, they are saying, I was always taught, if you write a press release and they print it almost word for word, like that's great. Like what you did was right. They used everything you want. And that's really what happened. I spent 20 years in this business, and most Fortune 500 companies can't hold message discipline with 40 executives in a room. They did it with 1,000 celebrities. Like, right? Like think of how much like the iPhones get leaked and things like that happen all the time. That's not luck. That's just a massive operation that's happening, right? The timing that we talked about, let's talk about the donation portion of it. That was not an accident, right? And it was also paired very well with who they are. $26 million to 20 charities before the ceremony, right? We're talking children's hospitals, food banks, music programs, things in Kansas City, Nashville, New York, Rhode Island. Every one of those places is part of their story, right? It's not a massive like, oh, they gave $26 million to this random cancer, fund. That it all was a part of their story. That is not distraction, where most people might, from an online standpoint, might pull and pick apart and say, they did that just so people wouldn't talk crap about their wedding. It's not true. They're reinforcing who people already believe they are, which is that, the only kind of philanthropy comms that truly works in this scenario. There was a cost, right, to this, and that's where the little bit of both in this lives, right? There was a bar owner that came out that was directly across from Madison Square Garden and said, hey, look, you closed down my bar on July 4th weekend. Like nobody could get here. Like this is one of my biggest weekends of the year. And nobody from the city or the couple's team ever got back to him. That's a stakeholder miss that as a good PR professional, you got to look at every single detail. And in something like this, I can see how it gets dropped, but you've got to look at everything. Small, it's cheap to prevent, and it handed a lot of critics, an easy thing to kind of pull apart. Like, look at this small business owner that you big millionaires are pulling apart, right? If I'm advising a team, I'm saying like, buy out that bar. Like that is a risk for us from a reputation standpoint. Just buy out the bar and it never becomes a story. But the test that really matters is the people angry on X, right? They were never the audience for this. The audience is the fans, the football fans, the Kansas City Chiefs fans, the Taylor Swift fans. They're all still there and probably even more rabid now that these two are together. If the people you need still trust you when everything else kind of goes away, then your strategy really worked. And this one worked, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think that is such an excellent analysis, and something that, even though I am not like a Taylor Swift fan, something I always say about her is that, and I understand she's not doing her own PR, right? But like her whole machine that she has is so genius. I mean, the people that she has working with her know their stuff. They know what they are doing. And the business of Taylor Swift, right, and the brand of Taylor Swift is so well managed. It's actually crazy. I mean, like, if you really need a good PR case study, like, I think she's one for like a generational PR case study. You know what I mean?
Look at the biggest thing that people criticized her on, which was, why are you having a wedding at Madison Square Garden? Like, why are you doing it there? Right? Well, we don't know. I mean, why did you get married where you got married last year? Why did I get married where I got married, right? Maybe that venue has some type of significance to her, right? I don't believe just from a true looking at it from myself, I don't believe the thing that Taylor wants to do everything so everybody pays attention. If she did why is she hiding in freaking food carts, right, at Kansas City football games, right? So people don't see that she's there, right? Why is she doing these crazy? If she wanted it to all be about her, she would be like dropped in from a helicopter on the 50-yard line, right? All those things. She's not telling the cameras to shine on her all the time. And we've seen multiple instances where she does things to try to not be seen. So, when I look at that and say, hey, we don't know why Madison Square Garden was selected, but if you look at everything else around the wedding, nothing else screams, hey, she did this because she wanted everybody to look at her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that this is a good example as well of like supply and demand, right? Just to your point about, things that she would do per se, right? If she just wanted attention all the time, her fans love her. They want to know what's going on in her life. And, I have a Swiftie that I'm very close to in my life who has said, as long as Taylor is happy, I'm happy, so I think there's also, just with the current media environment, there's like a little bit of like the parasocial relationship type thing, like because people feel like they really know Taylor. And again, that's because her brand is so strong and so good and so well curated, right? Like even if you don't actually know her personally, you feel like you know her. So I think there's a supply and demand piece of this, right? There's demand for to see her at the games, to know about what's going on at her wedding, right? To create that kind of conversation and speculation among the people who are her target audience, right? The people who buy her albums, who buy her merchandise, who go to see her tours, right? The people who love her and support her. The audience is not all the naysayers, right? And the haters, so to speak. So yeah, it's just a really, really interesting point that you make. And I think,
where it comes down to, Stephanie, is that every communication strategy has trade-offs, and people need to realize that and think about that, right? If you're reaching everyone, and a lot of times, the campaigns that people are listening to this podcast are not launching campaigns that reach millions and millions and millions and millions of people, right? But even if it's a small campaign, you're still going to have trade-offs, right? If you're reaching everyone at the scale that Travis and Taylor are, someone is going to hate it, right? And if you look at where the criticism came from, some people said too much spectacle, which seems to be the biggest one, right? People wanted more access. My wife wanted to see what it looked like, and I'm sure a lot of people too, right? Locals were mad because, unfortunately, why did Taylor and Travis plan their wedding on a day when it was going to be so hot, right? And the electrical grid was already like, geez, why didn't they think of that, right? Like things like that. And then even a Daily Mail columnist, I was reading earlier last night when I was prepping for this, they called the whole thing a narcissistic spectacle, right? Things like that. People just wanted to pick apart the pieces. Hell, even the $26 million donations got criticized because for some people, a billionaire giving money is proof that of a problem, not a solution, right? So when these criticisms contradict each other, it usually tells you something. It means the team made an actual decision instead of trying to please everyone. They said, hey, here are the narratives we want to own. And if people spin off and get pissed off about, the venue or whatever, that's fine. They're not trying to please everyone. It's how they end up with communications nobody remembers and nobody trusts, right? So the distinction I want executives to take from this, if you're listening, is there's a difference between noise and stakeholders. And I've worked a lot with executives in high stakes situations to where they really get attracted to the noise. Like, oh my gosh, these people are saying this on social, right? And you have to say, that's noise. Let's look at the people we were actually trying to get, right? So if you look at the columnists calling it tacky, it's noise, 100%. She was never the audience for this, and responding to it, right, gives the criticism this oxygen that it hasn't earned, and then it allows it to grow. So, they're not going to do that. The bar owner that we talked about earlier, losing this holiday weekend of business, that's a stakeholder. He was materially affected by the decisions, and he deserved the call. He didn't get one. It was a miss, right? So companies a lot of times confuse these two constantly. They panic over noise and neglect stakeholders. And the wedding team got the first one right, they missed the second, but it was I don't want to keep harping on the second one. It wasn't a massive one, and they still have time to repair that. But, you need to answer the people that you affect and ignore the people who just have opinions about you when it comes to big campaigns and big things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, to that point, something I've seen, online in discourse around Taylor Swift and, PR and things like that is the word overexposure. So to you, like, is there risk of overexposure for Taylor Swift? What does that actually mean? And are there any real examples that you're aware of, right, in the past of a celebrity or a brand having overexposure and how that actually causes damage, right? Like, what are some of the potential risks, if any, of the way that Taylor Swift's PR is currently being handled? Like, just in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that people look at a lot of times is, the monetization of their relationship, right? Is this wedding going to be released as a Disney Plus special in 6 months? Right. And things like that. And I think there's a distinction worth making there that they monetize their careers, right? Like, you're doing this podcast maybe to help your career and spread Pryor and other things, right? Just like I'm here because, one, I want to talk about this and this is a fun conversation, but also I would love to work with other people that are listening, right? They've never sold access to their relationship, right? There's no exclusive photo deals. They're not doing reality shows. You haven't seen any sit down tell-alls about their romances and things like that. You might see them on the New Heights podcast, right? But that's Travis and Jason's podcast. Again, we're not talking noise, we're talking stakeholders there, right? So those are the moments you see them. They're not doing all these other things. Travis talks about his life on that podcast because that's his job there. And there's a real difference between talking about your life and selling tickets to it. They didn't sell tickets to the wedding. There's a speculation that professionals footage was shot at the wedding. So I don't know if they'll ever monetize it or not. It's something I don't know. Now, if a wedding documentary shows up next year on Disney Plus, like I said, we could probably have a different conversation there. And the questions will probably be the same one. Does it fit who they've shown themselves to be, or does it break the pattern? Pattern breaks are where trust starts to erode, and that's where we could really talk about that. But again, think about the rabid Taylor fans, the people that are looking at the number 13, and I'm going to put this together and that together and this together, right? Who knows what, if they did shoot something and if something comes out. But again, you need to look at, if it erodes trust, whose trust is it eroding? Are those fans wanting to see a moment in Travis and Taylor's life like that? So I think there's a difference there from monetizing your career and monetizing your relationship. And I think when you look at it that way, and you're talking about overexposure, you can kind of pull it apart to say, okay, I understand why Taylor and Travis show up when they do, especially Taylor. I think it's more Taylor than anything. Travis is there, but he's not as out. Travis is like associated, right? A lot more, with her. So you look at where she shows up and where she doesn't, and I think you can see where she's not pulling the overexposure piece so much. Again, football season, it wasn't Taylor. I think there are a lot, in my opinion, it wasn't Taylor that was telling NBC, CBS, and all the other folks to say, show me in the box every time somebody scores or blah, 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 right? And you saw it last season, that didn't happen as much than it did the first season that they were together, because I think CBS and NBC, they're trying to go to their core stakeholders, right, which are the football fans. They saw the backlash and decided not to show it anymore. But the first year, they were riding the high of, holy crap, all these people are going to tune in because they want to see if Taylor's here. So, that's just my thoughts there on, is she really kind of oversharing, being out in the moment too much, or are they really just trying to monetize their careers?
Yeah, I think she is just like an enigma again. Like, if we're looking at this purely from a PR perspective, again, as someone who is not a fan of her and thinks some of the criticisms of her are quite valid, like, that's just my opinion. But looking at her from a PR perspective, purely, like, she's a freaking genius at it. Like,
Yeah.
she's a genius at it, for real. I mean, even with, like, if you think about if she releases a, video to, like, Disney Plus, or puts it in the theater or whatever, like she did with the Eras tour. I mean, it was still genius because there's so many people, so many fans of hers that loved her that maybe couldn't afford to buy tickets to the concert, or maybe they did go and they just wanted to see it again. Putting it out into a movie theater gave them a chance to all get together and watch it. It's like, you look at this stuff, you're like, you're just a genius.
Yeah. You can not like her music, right? You can think Travis is a terrible tight end and all these other things, right? But when it comes down to it, you cannot deny how good she is at managing her business and her career, because she has done a masterclass at that. And a lot of that is in the PR of it. I mean, you're looking at, unfortunately, someone that was going through what we all did. Like, would you like to have somebody taking photos of everyone that you dated, right? And have like videos of that for everybody, and everybody talking about, well, she got rid of that guy in 2 weeks, or why did she stay? Like, no, nobody wants that, right? Now she did pull it into her career when she made music about it, but she's done a fantastic job at controlling the narrative to the people that matter to her, which are her main stakeholders. And I think I think we will look back on this many, many years from now and just say, wow, like when it comes to music and that career, nobody managed her career like her. I mean, look at what she went through with her big Masters dispute and how she came out of that. I mean, it's just, and more empowered and people more, proud of her and things like that. So, not saying that she doesn't ever make a slip up or make a mistake or things like that from a PR standpoint. We all do, even the best pros do, but she has done a fantastic job at recovering.
Yeah, period. I mean, I think, again, if anybody needs a PR case study, like the best PR case study in the last decade at least, look no further than Taylor Swift and Tree Payne and her whole PR team, because these people know what they are doing and they understand their audience. They understand the stakeholders. And she has
a dispute that I was just mentioning, like that saga really proves this whole thesis. Like, she lost the legal and business fight over her masters, her music, the one thing that matters most, right? Then she won the trust fight. What did she do? She re-recorded all the albums, told the fans, like, that is a case study right there in itself. She told the fans exactly what she was doing and why she was doing it, and the fans followed her. Instead of her catalog, they followed her. They came in as music fans. They liked the songs from 1987 or whatever, but they followed her instead of that catalog. And I really can't think of a cleaner case of trust beating leverage than that moment right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be a great place to wrap up this whole conversation. Though I know we could definitely keep talking more and more about this, and I know I have some other questions. Maybe I'll have to have you back on to talk about the whole Taylor Swift, Blake Lively thing.
Yeah.
But in closing, one last question for you: what's your favorite Taylor Swift album?
Oh, it's 1987, and the reason why is as a kid of the 80s, obviously, but my oldest daughter, who's now 14, was 4 at the time and somehow fell in love with that album. There's also a video buried somewhere on Twitter of my 4-year-old singing Bad Blood and inviting Taylor to her 4th birthday. So, I think that album, we also took her to see Taylor on that tour, and it would have been, it was Halloween night, when she was 4 years old, and she missed Halloween night. But Taylor came out dressed as Olaf. She brought Idina Menzel out, and Idina was dressed as Elsa and sang "Let It Go" and all that. So 1987 really holds a key part to my heart because of that, because I can still think of my daughter when she's young. But there's been some albums of hers that I've kind of been like, but there's been some good ones too. So, I think, to be honest with you, when it all comes down to it, looking at the way Taylor has handled criticism, looking at the way that she has handled her career and things like that, that I'm happy that my daughters are listening to her, because it is a great role. It is a great role model for women. I mean, what she is doing, not saying she's the perfect role model, but the way she has stood up for herself and the things that she has done throughout her career, makes me proud that my daughters are listening to her.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And, I'll just chime in to say, like, even though I'm really not a Taylor Swift fan, I did really like the Folklore album. There's a couple songs from that one that I actually really, really like. So I hope at some point she puts out something again similar to that, because I loved that one. But yeah, I mean, she has a lot of she has some bangers for sure. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there. But Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights and perspective on this hot button conversation with our listeners. It was a really great and fun conversation. Again, I feel like we could probably talk about this for 2 more hours. But before we sign off here, Matt, can you please tell us where friends of Good Marketing with Stephanie can find you online?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. So just look me up, Matt C, 7 letters. It's that easy. Or you can go to my website, mattccommunications.com. Love to help anybody out that I can, or talk more Taylor.
Yes, absolutely. And that's Matt C, S-E-E, not C like the letter C, but S-E-E.
I'm not that cool. I'm not that cool to have a last name that is 1 letter, but I am cool enough to have a full name that is only 7 letters. So yes. There you go.
Absolutely. And we'll also include those links in the show notes just for easy access there. But yeah, thank you so much again, Matt, for joining me. And until next time, for anybody listening to this podcast, if you learned something new or you heard an idea that, lit a spark for you, please do subscribe, rate, and share the Good Marketing with Stephanie podcast. And until next time, thank you all for listening. And thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you.